So let's hear what's wrong with it.
Okay, so like I said, there are a lot of disparate elements. So it does seem very disjointed in a way, and I think that for a lot of people, they'll approach the work and not be able to get anything out of it really, because, like, for example, the writings of Paul Feig are from the artist Monet Kolowski, and the writings from the two feminist artists are done by Christina Ivanowska, and it kind of seems like they're in their own little worlds when they're making this collaborative piece, which doesn't really make it mesh together as well. And I think some of the writings that were selected are really odd. Like there's this it's almost like a play in here, and it seems sort of fictional, and it's muddied, and a lot of the writings don't really go together. So it seems to be stabbing out in all these different directions, and it's very difficult to follow the narrative. So I think it's clear that this was done by two different people in a way that isn't as successful as if they had collaborated a lot more with the same line of thinking, like, because they do come at it from kind of different places. They come at it with their own ways of working. Sort of like they were working in separate rooms, and then they just put everything that they made together.
Like a two-person show
Instead of one piece, exactly.
Is the book a separate? I mean, do you see the book as like a part two of this, or?
Well, kind of. The book is part of the piece. I mean, you're supposed to go back to the library here and take it away with you, and then read it later. So in a way, it is.
Are there instructions about that? Do they tell you, or?
I think you're just allowed to assume, and also I was told by the guide that I could have it. But I mean, Emily came here the other day and wasn't sure if she was allowed to take it or not. So I think. Oh, okay. But you still didn't.
I didn't take it initially. I took it now.
Okay.
You topped it up. No, you didn't.
Okay. So I think that the publication is meant to expand on what you see here, but it has a lot of stuff in it that isn't present in the artwork itself. That's
what I wondered about. Yeah.
Yeah. So it doesn't necessarily tie in directly, and that could be seen as a weakness because these are writings that, although selected by the artists, were not created by the artists. So, I mean, there's a lot here that was somebody else's. Yeah. There's a lot of appropriation. So.
Do you think the Feck writings are about faith letting you down?
Yeah, I think so.
Failure of faith.
Yeah. Yeah. And those were discovered after his death. I don't know. I think that aesthetic is really interesting because I don't think those are originals, but they're kind of old looking. And
I wonder about that, whether they're meant to be, because there's a little theater here too, isn't there? And if they're aged, they either actually got a hold of the original documents, and that is a particular kind of presentation of the archival, or they've actually done like the kids' equivalent of, burning the paper a little bit with match to make it look like a pirate map.
Well, they're rewritten over there, right? They're re-excerpted with the drawings, which makes me think they're not original.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're not. And also the paint, the gold paint, is supposed to imitate a fresco in a church that both artists were fascinated by. But it's interesting because it's just the shape of the fresco. It's not what's actually in the fresco. So, but it's, you know, it's in gold, which is...
It's like the distressed fragments that we see when we go in and we're looking at those couple of altar pieces, and we see that piece there that is just a vestige of something that had been extremely important and fully realized, presumably there, and was the reason for the building to exist. Or, you know, the paintings were the culmination of that. They're gone now.
Yeah, so I think there's an interesting play between it being, all right, this is a fresco from the church, and it's gold, which is a holy color, but it's also not representational. It's monochromatic. It's but another thing that's interesting, for the shine of the gold to be there, it had to be painted twice, originally gray and then gold on top. So,
So, do you think anyone going into this area would immediately get that it's a church?
I'm not certain. I don't quite know how to answer that because I'm not someone who went to a lot of churches. I don't really have that connection with...
Did you get that it was a church when you went there?
I didn't, because I don't have that connection, so I can't speak for someone who knows what the shape of a church is. Like, I think this shape is telling that it is a church, maybe, but I'm not sure.
You've got
because I'm not...
you've got the constructed space, and then you walk into it, you've got to have that almost altar-like piece in the back. So I didn't read when I first came here, I didn't read this. I came and I looked at it and started, that's kind of how I thought about things. And I did get that sense of either a recreation of a place of worship or a reference to something of sorts.
Right.
With how many churches we've been in over the past couple of weeks.
Well, I saw this earlier in the trip, so
It's interesting that this isn't illuminated either. You know, that it's again a kind of
Yeah, it's all
purposely
natural light.
oriented away from but it's not even oriented to use the natural light. It's oriented to ignore the natural light. And it's not really using the electric light either. And then it has this very purposefully applied gold leaf. So maybe there's a little bit of a question of execution there too that's problematic. I wonder. It's obviously a decision. It's obviously not by accident.
I think something that's interesting is, like, this is one of the better lit places.
So naturally you put up a wall to block the light.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Why isn't it
Yeah.
this way?
Why doesn't it have windows?
It does have windows, sort of. They're painted in, or not painted.
So it doesn't have
It would have been
Left out in.
interesting, and I think it would have more of that church-like appeal if it had windows. Since when I first came in, I'm like, okay, what is this? This is
I think that it's not necessary for it to initially come off as a church for everyone. I mean, for Ben, it did. He got church, and I think that a lot of people will. I didn't get church immediately.
I wouldn't say church necessarily, but like a place of some kind of contemplation
I think it definitely comes across as something that...
There's that faith and notion of some kind of aspect of what it is. Yes, church is something different that I think is going to be individually based on kind of the frequency, the notions that the individual has.
Exactly, which is why I don't think it's important for it to come across as, oh, this is a representation of a fresco. It is this place of contemplation, and I think it does come across as that, And I think that that's important to the work, but I don't think that it should be screaming that it's a church for everyone that comes in, because I probably wouldn't like it as much as I do if it originally was just like, hi, I'm a church, you know? So I think that aspect is very successful because it opens itself to all viewers, and that's something that the work itself aims to do. It's not just, let's talk about God. It's, let's talk about faith and what that actually means for somebody who's alive.
Faith in making the world.
Faith in anything.